One day before my mom's birthday, she texted me, "Don't come. Everly's bringing her boyfriend and doesn't want Roland there." My heart tightened as I read that cold message from my mom. That was when I decided to stand up and fight for my son's right to be treated fairly. Was I wrong to ruin that birthday party to protect my child? Follow the story and share your thoughts. Hello everyone, my name is Simon. I'm 32 years old. I'm living a peaceful and happy life with my wife, Bella, our 7-year-old son, Roland, and my dad, Charles, in a small house in the suburbs. But to get to this peaceful place, I had to go through a painful journey just a year ago. It all started about a week before my mom's birthday. She called to tell me about the party she was planning. Roland and I were watching TV after dinner that evening when my phone rang. It was Mom. I picked up right away. After a few polite greetings, she excitedly told me, "This year, I want to have a bigger birthday party. I'm considering inviting some friends, relatives, and neighbors to celebrate." Hearing that made me feel unexpectedly happy inside. Without hesitation, I responded enthusiastically, "That's great, Mom. I'm all for it." Then I added, "Don't worry about the cost. I'll help with $1,000 so you can throw a nice party." Hearing my offer, my mom got emotional and said, "Thank you so much, Simon. You and your family have to come early that day." We chatted a bit more, then hung up. After the call, I turned to Bella, sitting beside me, and told her everything. She smiled and nodded in agreement. Then the two of us shared the good news with Roland. As soon as he heard it, our 7-year-old shouted, "Dad, I'm going to make Grandma a card. I want to draw pretty flowers and write her a birthday message." Seeing Roland so excited filled my heart with joy. I hugged him tightly, thinking that this little handmade card would bring our family closer together. But I had no idea this joy would soon become unbearable pain. In the days that followed, every evening, Roland insisted that Bella and I sit with him while he worked on Grandma's birthday card. He firmly told us, "You two can only give advice. I'm doing everything myself." Looking at the crooked little letters that said, "Happy Birthday, Grandma," written in crayon, I felt this strange warmth in my chest. Every innocent sketch, every carefully colored flower, it all touched me deeply. When the card was finally finished, I could already picture the smile on my mom's face when she received it. I imagined Roland beaming with pride as Grandma hugged him, kissed his forehead, and praised the beautiful card he had spent a whole week making just for her. But that sweet image in my head was shattered by a harsh reality. That morning, the day before Mom's birthday, while I was focused on work at the office, my phone buzzed with a message. I saw Mom on the screen and opened it immediately, thinking she had some updates about the party. But the moment I read the message, I froze. She had written, "Don't come. Everly's bringing her boyfriend and doesn't want Roland there." My hands started shaking uncontrollably. Shock, anger, and disappointment hit me at once, making breathing hard. I couldn't believe my mother would send something so cruel. I called her back immediately, hoping there had been some misunderstanding. But the phone just rang and rang. I called repeatedly, each unanswered ring feeling like a knife to the chest. After lunch, completely unable to focus, I decided to take the rest of the afternoon off and drive to my mom's house to confront her face to face. During the 40-minute drive, my mind was spinning with questions. Why would she say something like that? How could a 7-year-old child be such a problem that he wasn't even allowed to attend his own grandmother's birthday? But what hurt me the most was realizing that Mom again chose Everly over everyone else. I arrived at my mother's house around 2 p.m. She was sitting in the living room watching TV. When she saw me walk in with a tense expression, she looked surprised and asked, "Why are you here at this hour? Aren't you supposed to be at work?" Ignoring her question, I got straight to the point. "What exactly did you text me?" She frowned and replied, "I was just letting you know. Everly's bringing her boyfriend over, and..." I cut her off. "And what, Mom? Why isn't my son allowed at his grandmother's birthday party?" She hesitated momentarily, then said, "You know how Roland can be. A bit too energetic. I'm worried he might do something embarrassing in front of the guests. Important people will be there. I don't want awkward moments." Hearing that weak excuse made anger rise sharply inside me. Before I could respond, Everly suddenly walked in from the kitchen. It seemed she had overheard our conversation. She looked at me and said coldly, "You know as well as I do. Roland's broken glasses, spilled drinks on the new sofa. Last time we had guests, he ran around and made everyone uncomfortable. I don't want that happening in front of my boyfriend." Her tone didn't falter once. She had clearly rehearsed this, probably expecting me to come and demand an explanation. Trying to stay calm, I asked, "So you think Roland is a bad kid? Did you forget what you were like when you were his age?" Everly snapped back, "That's different. This is an important event. We can't risk him ruining the atmosphere." When she said that, it hit me like a punch to the gut. My sister had changed. The little sister I once loved and protected was now someone else entirely. Before I could say another word, my dad, Charles, walked in from the garage. He had caught the tail end of the conversation and looked straight at my mom. With a firm voice, he said, "What are you doing? How could you say something like that about your grandson? How could you exclude him from the party?" After that, he turned to Everly and asked her, "Do you remember what you were like as a kid? You broke Grandma's antique vase worth over $1,000. You scorched the stove trying to cook because you were curious. You almost set the whole house on fire playing with matches when you were 8. But did anyone in this family ever hate you for that? Did anyone ever ban you from a birthday party?" Hearing Dad mention the past, Everly dropped her head, avoiding eye contact. She mumbled something underwater, but no one could make it out. A few seconds later, Dad said sternly, "Roland is a 7-year-old child. How can you treat him like this?" Then he turned back to my mom and declared, "If you don't apologize to Simon's family right now and invite them to the party, I won't be attending your birthday, and I'll cut ties with both you and Everly." Hearing that threat, my mom jumped up and screamed at him, "You're threatening me? Don't forget who's taken care of you for over 30 years, who's cooked, cleaned, and raised your kids." But Dad stayed calm. He replied, "And I've cared for you for over 30 years too. I worked to support this family, repaired the house, and paid for the kids' education. Let's not start keeping score. I've kept quiet for over 3 decades, hoping you change. But I won't stand by while you mistreat our grandson." After those heavy words, the living room fell into a tense silence. For the first time in my life, in over 30 years of being his son, I saw my dad stand up against my mom's favoritism. Watching my parents argue so bitterly over my son left me feeling gutted. At the same time, I came to a painful realization, one I had tried to ignore for so long. My mom was never going to change. She would always prioritize appearances over family, control over love. As I was getting ready to leave, overwhelmed with disappointment, my dad followed me to the car. He leaned in quietly and said, "You can choose your life. Don't let anyone control you anymore. I know exactly how you feel." After hearing those words, I knew I had to make an important decision to protect my little family from the toxic people in my life, my mother and my sister. I was burning with anger the entire drive home from my parents' house. I was furious at my mom's blatant favoritism, how she treated Roland like he was a burden instead of her grandson. As those thoughts swirled in my head, childhood memories came flooding back. I grew up in a family with just 2 kids. Everly was born when I was 10 years old. By then, things were more financially stable than the tough early years, so my parents decided to have another child to bring more joy into the home. From the moment Everly entered this world, she became the shining star of our household, and I was expected to make room for her, take care of her, and constantly put her first. That was understandable. She was 10 years younger than I. But what stood out was that I never felt resentful or jealous. On the contrary, I was happy. In addition to having loving parents, I had a little sister who shared my blood, someone I could protect and look out for. Growing up, my mom, Elena, was always in charge. Every choice had to go through her, from picking our schools to deciding what we could or couldn't do. She ran the house with a particular kind of authority. Everything had to be perfect according to her standards, and there was no room for disagreement. My dad, Charles, was a hard-working plumber. Quiet and reserved, he rarely stepped in regarding how Mom raised us. But what I always admired most about him was his fairness. Even though Everly was the youngest and Mom's favorite, when it came to birthdays or Christmas, Dad always ensured I had something just as lovely. He never played favorites, and that made a world of difference. It kept me from ever feeling left out as a child. Our family became even warmer and even more joyful when I married Bella, and Roland was born. I truly believed that Roland would be surrounded by unconditional love, just like the love I once gave to Everly when she was little. I genuinely thought my parents would love their grandson wholeheartedly. But that day, after walking out of my mom's house, after hearing what she and Everly had said, I realized I'd been wrong. What made it even more bitter was that ever since Bella and I got married and had Roland, We'd done everything we could to be good children to my parents. With my job as a software engineer and Bella's work as an accountant, we had a pretty stable income. That's why we rarely said no to my parents' requests, so long as they were reasonable and within our means. I remember once, my mom needed to replace her old, broken fridge. Without a second thought, I drove to an appliance store and bought her a $1,200 refrigerator, including delivery and installation. 2 months later, she said the washing machine was too loud and needed replacing. I got her an $800 Whirlpool washer with a 3-year extended warranty. Then came the $2,000 genuine leather sofa after my dad complained the old one was uncomfortable and embarrassing in front of guests. I ordered a premium set from Ashley Furniture and even picked the color based on his liking. After that, it was a 65-inch 4K Sony TV for $1,500 because my mom said her eyesight wasn't good enough for the smaller screen. I didn't just buy the TV, I hired professionals to mount it and set up all the premium channels. There were dining tables, wardrobes, kitchen tools, and an air fryer. Nearly everything in that house had been paid for the past 7 years with our money. However, the most significant expense was supporting Everly's education. Over the past 2 years of college, Bella and I have spent around $20,000 so she wouldn't have to work a part-time job. Every semester, I transferred the money on time without needing a reminder. We started helping her after she came to our house in tears, telling us how crushing her student loan interest was. I initially offered to loan her the money interest-free over 5 years, but Bella encouraged me to gift it to her as a big brother's way of showing he cares. And it didn't stop there. I occasionally gave her money for living expenses and bought her a new laptop. I just wanted her to have a comfortable life and focus on school instead of worrying about money like I once did. I've spent nearly $50,000 on my family, a massive amount for a middle-class household like ours. After all the sacrifices I made, my time, my money, my love, what I got in return was a cold, dismissive text telling my family we weren't welcome at a birthday party. And worse, it was Everly, the identical sister whose tuition I was still paying for the next 2 years, who had the nerve to talk about our family being embarrassed by Roland's presence. They didn't love me or my family. They only loved what I could give them. To them, I was nothing more than an ATM. Faced with that kind of cruelty and injustice, I knew I had to protect my son and my self-respect. I couldn't let Roland grow up in a family where he was looked down on and judged. Right then, a very different plan started to take shape in my mind. If by the next morning my mom and Everly didn't call to apologize and invite us back to the party, I would give them a birthday they'd never forget. That evening, after dinner, while Roland sat on the living room rug building a Lego castle, I decided it was time to tell Bella everything that had happened since that morning. As soon as I mentioned the message from my mom, Bella stopped doing the dishes and turned to look at me, her eyes filled with surprise. When I got to the part where Everly said Roland made the family look bad, Bella put down the dish towel and silently listened. After I finished telling her about the confrontation at my parents' house, she just stood there quietly, shocked by everything she'd just heard. She didn't say a word, just stared over at Roland, who was happily focused on his little Lego creation. In that moment, watching her expression, I knew she was hurting just as much as I was. After a long silence, I finally said, "Tomorrow, take Roland to the zoo. Okay? Don't mention anything about Grandma's birthday. As for me, I've got my plans." Bella nodded, understanding, then asked, "What are you planning to do?" I answered, "I'm going to take back what's mine." She didn't press for details. She looked into my eyes and reminded me, "Please don't do anything that'll get you in trouble. They're not worth it." I smiled and reassured her, "Don't worry, I won't break any laws. I'm just going to reclaim everything I bought for them." That night, while Bella read bedtime stories to Roland, I sat in my home office and started making a detailed list of everything I had bought for my parents over the years. I dug through online receipts and transfer confirmations and carefully noted down the address of a second-hand furniture dealer I had found earlier online. Once everything was organized, I knew tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The next morning, at 11 a.m., I pulled up to my mother's house in a large white moving truck, accompanied by 2 uniformed employees from a used furniture pickup service. As we entered the house, I immediately noticed about 30 guests. Light jazz music floated through the air, mingled with cheerful laughter and conversation. It was a lively birthday atmosphere. As soon as some relatives saw me, they warmly greeted me. Aunt Linda, my mom's cousin, walked over and said, "Simon, so glad you made it. Just a bit ago, Elena told us your family couldn't come because you had something going on." Hearing that, A slow, simmering anger started building inside me. A few others curiously asked about Bella and Roland. I politely replied, "My wife took Roland to the zoo today. They couldn't make it." Right then, my mom, Elena, came out beaming. She was wearing a green floral dress, entirely made up, looking vibrant and cheerful. When she saw me, she whispered, "You came alone. That's good. It'll be more comfortable this way." Hearing that, I looked her straight and responded coldly, "I'm disappointed in you." Her smile faltered momentarily, her face visibly confused, but she quickly forced it back on in front of her guests. I glanced around the house and noticed my dad wasn't there. I figured he had followed through on his warning from the day before and chosen not to attend the party. About a minute after greeting everyone, I began executing my plan. I signaled for the two movers to follow me, then walked straight into the house. As soon as I entered the living room, I made a beeline for the Bluetooth speaker playing soft jazz. Without saying a word, I turned it off and unplugged it from the wall. The sudden silence caught everyone off guard. All eyes turned toward me, filled with confusion and disbelief. After disconnecting the speaker, I pointed at the 65-inch Sony TV mounted on the wall and told the movers, "Take that down." The scene shocked every guest in the room. Moments ago, the house had been full of laughter. Now, everyone stood frozen, not knowing what was happening. Immediately, my mom rushed over and shouted, "Simon, what are you doing?" My heart was pounding at the sound of her voice, but I stayed calm. "I'm taking back what's mine," I replied coolly. Her tone turned sharp. "What do you mean, yours?" "That's my stuff," I answered calmly. "Everything has receipts in my name, along with the bank transfers. Would you like to see them?" That shut her up. Hearing the commotion, Everly and a man I didn't recognize hurried into the room. When she saw the movers carefully taking the TV off the wall, she screamed, "What are you doing? Stop!" Not letting her interfere, I turned to her and said, "Step aside." Everly moved in front of me and shouted, "No, you can't do this." Looking her in the eyes, I said, "Do you want me to call the police? Let them verify who owns this stuff." That stopped her. She froze and said nothing more. Around us, some guests began whispering, clearly uncomfortable. A few looked ready to leave, but I ignored their whispers. I wasn't here for them. I had a mission and I intended to finish it. When the movers finished taking down the TV and carefully carried it to the truck, I pointed them toward the kitchen and said, "Next is the Samsung fridge." At that point, the tension in the living room reached its peak. Guests stood frozen, unsure of what to say or do. A few seconds later, Aunt Linda, my mom's cousin, stepped forward and gently said, "Simon, I understand you're upset, but please, calm down and tell everyone what's going on." Before I could speak, my mom jumped in, shouting, "He's just being ungrateful." I scolded him a little, and now he's doing all this. Hearing that, I felt a deep disappointment settle in. Instead of owning up to her actions, she blamed me. But Aunt Linda turned to her and said firmly, "Elena, stop. Let Simon speak." I looked around the room, taking in the crowd of guests, and began to explain everything. How my mother had texted me the day before, asking my entire family not to attend her birthday. The reason, she said my 7-year-old son, Roland, was too unruly and would embarrass the family. So today I was here to take back what I had paid for, because she didn't deserve to keep any of it. The room fell utterly silent. Guests stared at my mother, stunned, unable to believe what they had just heard. Then Aunt Linda spoke again. "Show me the message." Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and displayed the text she'd sent the day before. As people read the message, murmurs spread throughout the room. The warmth in their eyes toward my mother started to fade. Mr. Mike, our longtime neighbor, spoke up sharply, "Elena, how could you do something like that? Roland's just a kid." Next, Janet, Mom's best friend since their youth, shook her head in disappointment and said, "I can't believe you'd treat your grandson that way." Then Helen turned to Everly and asked, "Everly, what made you think it was okay to exclude Roland? How could you feel that way?" Everly quickly defended herself, saying, "I don't hate Roland. I was just afraid he might break something and cause a scene." I cut her off and turned to everyone. "Let me ask you this. Would any of you feel ashamed or embarrassed if Roland spilled a drink or broke a glass?" In unison, the guests all responded, "No." Helen even added, "I would have loved to see Roland today. When I came to celebrate Elena's birthday, I hoped he'd be here. Many of the relatives around her nodded in agreement. After I finished telling the whole story, the atmosphere in the living room changed completely. Shock quickly turned into sympathy and support for what I had done. Mr. George, our neighbor from across the street, shook his head and said to the room, "I don't think we should stay any longer. This party's lost all meaning." Immediately after, his wife, Susan, nodded and added, "Let's go, George. Elena needs some time to reflect on this." One by one, the guests started preparing to leave. They said polite goodbyes to me, many offering words of empathy for what my family had gone through. A few seconds later, Jason, Everly's boyfriend, stepped over to her, looking serious. "Everly, what I saw at this party today disappointed me. I have a niece, and it scares me to think that if we stayed together, one day you might say something like that about her, too." Hearing those words, my heart sank a little. It was clear this guy genuinely had a good heart. Everly stumbled over her words, saying, "Jason, please, can I explain later?" But Jason shook his head and said firmly, "We should end this." Then he turned to me, gave me a respectful nod, and walked straight out the door. Within 10 minutes, the once crowded room of 30 guests had thinned to just a few. The remaining guests were quietly gathering their things, getting ready to leave. Before leaving, Mrs. Margaret, the last neighbor still there, turned to my mom and said, "Elena, you owe Simon and his family an apology. What you did was wrong." Watching the mood shift so drastically, from cheerful celebration to silent disappointment, filled me with a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. And just like that, the house was nearly empty. Only my mom, Everly, the two movers, and I remained, surrounded by untouched party tables and the echo of a party that never truly happened. Once all the guests had left, I turned to the two movers and told them, "Keep going. Take everything on the list." Just then, my dad stepped out from the bedroom, calm and composed. He had stayed inside during the entire confrontation. The moment she saw him, my mom rushed to blame him. "You just let him take everything?" My dad replied, "He bought those things without missing a beat. He has every right to take them. I warned you yesterday. All you had to do was sit down, think things through, and apologize to his family. But you were too stubborn." Hearing that, my mom fell silent. She didn't say another word. For the next hour and a half, the two movers, clearly experienced, systematically dismantled and packed each item. First, the refrigerator was wheeled out, followed by the genuine leather sofa set and the Whirlpool washer. They took the microwave and several kitchen appliances, piece by piece, and the house emptied. The whole time, my mom and Everly just stood there, helpless. They didn't dare stop it. They couldn't do anything but watch as the house slowly lost everything that once made it feel full. Once all the furniture was loaded onto the truck, the moving company manager transferred $3,000 to my account. That was the amount they had paid to buy the used furniture. As I stared at the total on my screen, I felt a swirl of emotions. On one hand, there was satisfaction. I had stood up for my dignity. On the other hand, there was sorrow. As I looked around the now empty house I grew up in, it felt cold and hollow. That was when I realized I had officially closed a chapter of my life. After the truck finally pulled away, I turned back for one last look at the house. It now stood empty, bare walls and a few worn-out items I hadn't purchased. My mom sat on the front step, looking dazed, like someone who had lost everything. Everly was still standing near the door, holding her phone, eyes red from crying. She was trying to convince Jason to give her another chance. Before leaving, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the card Roland had spent a week creating. A small, handmade card with carefully colored flowers and the shaky words, "Happy Birthday, Grandma," written in crayon. I walked over to my mom, held the card out to her, and said, "This is the gift Roland made for you." I thought she might be touched for a moment, that she'd realize how wrong it was to exclude him. But she didn't. She suddenly stood up, snatched the card from my hand, and tore it to shreds right before me without hesitation. "Because of your family, my party was ruined," she screamed. Then Everly joined in, yelling, "Because of you, I lost my happiness." Watching that card being ripped apart, the one my son made with so much care and love, sent a sharp, gut-wrenching pain through my chest. But I didn't yell. I didn't lash out. Instead, I calmly bent down and started picking up the torn pieces off the ground. Each scrap held the time, effort, and love that Roland had poured into it for his grandma. Once I had gathered all the pieces and placed them in my pocket, I stood up and looked straight at my mother. And in that moment, everything became crystal clear, the true nature of this woman. She hadn't just rejected her grandson's love. She had cruelly destroyed it right before his father. Finally, I looked her in the eyes and calmly said, "You don't deserve to be my mother." For a brief moment, the world seemed to stand still. My mother and Everly both froze, silent, unable to respond. About a minute after standing there for one final look at the house, I turned and walked straight to my car without looking back. Every step I took carried the weight of a decision. I was never returning to this place again. Just as I opened the car door and was about to get in, a familiar voice called behind me, "Wait, let me come with you." I turned around and saw my father walking out of the house, carrying 2 suitcases filled with his belongings. His face was calm but firm, as if he had been preparing for this moment for a long time. A wave of emotion hit me. Surprise, deep emotion, and an unexpected surge of happiness all rolled into one. When my mom saw her husband heading for the gate, she shot up from the front steps and yelled, "You're just going to leave me?" Dad turned to her and replied steadily, "I've endured enough. I warned you yesterday, and you still insisted on doing things your way." Then he continued toward my car. As he reached the gate, he turned back one last time and said, "From now on, you and Everly can live together. I can't stay with someone who doesn't know how to love their grandchild." His words left my mom and Everly frozen. Neither of them spoke, their faces filled with disbelief. As Dad walked up beside the car, he looked at me and asked, "You have space for me to stay, right?" My throat tightened with emotion, and in a shaky voice, I replied, "You can stay with me for the rest of your life." In that moment, everything inside me shifted. A bright, undeniable hope replaced the despair and loneliness I had felt just hours ago. I wasn't alone. I had my father, the one person in my family who truly understood and stood by me. As we got into the car together, my mom remained on the front steps, staring blankly after us. Everly sat down and buried her face in her hands, sobbing. And as the car slowly pulled away from that house, I realized this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something entirely new. That afternoon, when Bella returned from the zoo with Roland and saw me standing there with my dad and 2 suitcases, she was surprised. But she didn't ask any questions. She quietly headed into the kitchen and began preparing dinner like always. As for Roland, the moment he saw his grandpa, he ran straight into my dad's arms, beaming with joy. Then, with curious eyes, he asked, "Grandpa, where's Grandma? Why did you come to visit?" My dad responded gently, "Grandma's traveling somewhere far away. When she gets back, she'll come visit you." Roland nodded understanding and eagerly told him about his fun day at the zoo. After playing all day, Roland went to bed earlier than usual that evening. In the quiet of the living room, my dad turned to me and said, "Give me the pieces of the card." I reached into my jacket pocket and handed him the torn bits of paper. He sat down at the table and began patiently piecing them back together, like he was restoring something priceless. When Bella came out of the kitchen and saw what he was working on, Roland's shredded card, she began to cry. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she thought about how our son had spent an entire week making that card, only to have it destroyed so heartlessly by his grandmother. As I oversaw my father match and glue each tiny piece with his weathered hands, I felt something powerful stir inside me. It was like he was trying to mend not just a card, but the love my mother had tried to tear apart. Later that night, the 3 of us sat at the table, and I told Bella everything that had happened, from start to finish. After listening quietly, she looked at me and said, "You did the right thing. I support your decision." Then she turned to my dad and with warmth said, "Dad, please stay here with us. This is your home too." In that moment, I realized something profound and comforting. This right here with the people who genuinely love and value each other. This is my real family. We began our new life with Dad in the house in the following days. He slipped into the rhythm of our small family as if he'd always been there. Each morning, he took it upon himself to help bring Roland to school. Roland loved having Grandpa drop him off and pick him up, primarily because during those short drives, Dad would tell him fun stories from his plumbing days and teach him simple life skills. Dad would try to chip in from his pension every month to help cover household expenses. But I firmly turned him down and said, "Keep that money for yourself, Dad. I've got the family covered." Instead, without telling us right away, Dad quietly opened a college savings account for Roland at the bank. One day, he told me, "This is for my grandson's future. He's going to need that money for school someday. 2 months later, on a quiet weekend evening after Roland had gone to bed, Dad and I sat on the porch with a few beers. The cool night air set the perfect tone for an honest conversation. After a few sips, Dad opened up. "You know," he said, "I stuck around all those years because I kept hoping your mom would change. I thought maybe things would be different after Roland was born." Hearing that made my chest tighten. I finally understood just how much he had endured. He continued, "But when I saw how they treated Roland, an innocent little boy, I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You did something I couldn't do for 30 years. Those words struck deep. Our relationship felt lighter and closer for the first time in a long while. We talked more openly about work, Roland, and the future. There was a comfort in those conversations that hadn't been there before. This positive shift didn't just affect me. It touched our whole family. Bella was happy to have someone else to help with Roland. And Roland thrived under the guidance of a grandpa who truly loved teaching him. Still, Dad hadn't filed for divorce. Maybe a part of him was holding on to a sliver of hope that my mother might change, even though we both knew that was unlikely. After that dinner, I came to terms with something. This new life wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was filled with the kind of love that truly matters. About 3 months after my mother's birthday party, our peaceful life began to be disrupted by a series of unwanted messages. Everly started texting me constantly, pleas filled with desperation. Her first message read, "Big brother, I need help with my tuition for junior year. Please don't make me drop out." When I didn't respond, the messages got more urgent. "Can I just borrow part of it? I promise I'll pay you back after I graduate." Then, one Sunday afternoon, she showed up at our house. When I saw her standing at the door, eyes swollen from crying, I stepped outside and said firmly, "You should apply for a student loan and find a part-time job. I can't support you anymore." Through tears, Everly begged, "I know I messed up, but I need your help. I can't afford to drop out." I looked her in the eye and told her clearly, "The money I gave you before, I'm not asking for it back, but from now on, you're on your own." And it wasn't just Everly. My mom, Elena, showed up several times too, each time with a completely different demeanor. Humble, regretful. The first time she pleaded, "Simon, I know I was wrong. I'm sorry for everything. Please, just let me see Roland once." When she appeared, my dad stepped out of the house and said coldly, "Go home. We don't want to see you." She didn't give up. She turned to him, pleading, "Come back with me. I miss you. The house is so empty without you." But Dad shook his head. "You had your chance to change and you wasted it. It's too late now." During her final visit, Dad handed her Roland's card, which he had carefully pieced back together. The moment she saw it, her knees nearly buckled. She cried at the doorstep and said, "I was wrong." Watching all of this, I realized the immense power of setting boundaries. Not every relationship is worth salvaging, especially when they've caused harm to your child. And in that moment, a question quietly echoed in my mind. Someday, when Roland is older, will he understand why I made the choices I did? Nearly a year has passed since everything happened, and life has more or less settled down. Things have found their rhythm. My dad still takes Roland to school every day. Bella and I continue with our jobs, and Roland keeps growing, bringing home new stories from school every week. Sometimes, during dinner, Roland brings up Grandma without realizing it. He'll ask, "Is Grandma back from her trip yet?" Or, "When will she visit me?" In those moments, the three of us fall silent. We were lost in our thoughts, none of us saying a word. A few days ago, Dad surprised me during one of our usual beer nights on the porch. "Simon," he said, "I think I'll only stay with you for a little longer." I looked at him, surprised and worried. Did I do something wrong? Did Bella or I make you uncomfortable? He took a long sip of beer and calmly replied, "I'm thinking about returning to your mom. If she's truly changed, maybe I'll give her one last chance." And in that moment, I understood. 30 years together isn't something you walk away from overnight. The memories, the shared years, they don't just disappear. I slightly nodded and said, "I respect your decision, Dad. No matter where you are, you'll always be my father." When I told Bella about Dad's decision, I could see a flicker of sadness in her eyes. We'd all grown used to his warm presence in our home. Roland would miss him, not just for the school runs, but for everything he brought into our lives. Then, unexpectedly, Bella asked me, "Do you think you'll ever take Roland to visit his grandma?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared out the window. It was a question I'd been asking myself for months. Deep down, part of me still wants to forgive her. Part of me wants Roland to have a grandmother's love, like any other child. I don't want him growing up wondering why she never loved him. But the other part of me still remembers the hurt, still sees the moment she ripped his handmade card in half. I still question whether she's changed or just trying to get what she wants again. I'm sharing this story not for pity or sympathy, but because I genuinely need your advice. Here's my question for anyone who's heard this story. Should I forgive my mother? Please leave your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts, because this decision doesn't just affect me. It will also shape Roland's future. If this story touches something in you, don't forget to subscribe and support our channel. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. Take care, and I'll see you in the following story.